Amelia stood in the old, stone church, her hands trembling as they gripped the edges of her wedding dress. The scent of lilies filled the air, mingling with the soft murmur of excited voices, but none of it seemed to reach her. Her mind was elsewhere, far away from the bright smiles of her family and friends. She could barely focus on the vows being exchanged or the soft music playing in the background. Everything around her felt like a blur, as if she were floating above the room, detached from reality. The church was filled with the warmth of a spring afternoon, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. But Amelia's heart felt cold. She had dreamed of this day since she was a little girl, her wedding day, the day she would marry the man who would love her forever. But now, standing there in front of everyone, she felt anything but loved. The man beside her, Robert, was kind, handsome, and dependable. He was everything any woman could want in a husband. But there was a void inside her that Robert's love could never fill. As the priest spoke of love and commitment, Amelia's mind wandered. She thought of all the moments in her life that had led to this point, her childhood, the awkward teenage years, and the time she had spent alone, trying to figure out who she was. She remembered the days when she had dreams of adventure, when she believed in true love and fairy tales. But somewhere along the way, those dreams had faded. Now, here she was, standing at the altar, her heart heavy with doubt and confusion. Amelia had spent so much of her life trying to be perfect for others. Her family, her friends, and even Robert expected her to be something she wasn't. She had always felt like she was wearing a mask, pretending to be someone she thought everyone wanted her to be. But deep down, she felt empty. She felt like there was something missing, something she couldn't name. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't worthy of love. The vows were almost over, and Robert's eyes sparkled with affection as he looked at her, but Amelia couldn't meet his gaze. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, trapped in a life she had chosen but never truly felt was hers. A life that felt like a script someone else had written for her, with no room for her own desires or dreams. When the ceremony finally ended, Amelia walked down the aisle, her steps slow and heavy. She tried to smile, but it felt forced. The applause of their friends and family echoed in her ears, but it was as though the sound came from a distant place, far removed from the woman standing in front of them. Everyone was so happy for her, so proud, but inside, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just taken a step toward a life she didn't know how to live. After the ceremony, the reception took place in a large hall on the ranch, decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights. People gathered around, chatting, laughing, and toasting to the newlyweds. Robert had gone off to greet some of his old friends, leaving Amelia to stand by herself, feeling out of place. She couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of isolation. The people around her seemed to be enjoying themselves, but she felt disconnected, as if she were observing the world from behind a glass wall. Her eyes scanned the room, settling on a familiar face, a face she had known since childhood. Jake, the cowboy. He stood by the far wall, sipping a drink, his dark eyes watching the crowd. Amelia couldn't help but feel drawn to him. They had grown up together on the same ranch, but over the years, their paths had diverged. She had always admired Jake from afar, drawn to his quiet strength and the way he carried himself with a kind of rugged charm. He had always been the one person she could talk to when she needed comfort. But there was more to their bond than friendship. Somewhere deep inside her, she knew that. Jake had been there during some of the most difficult times in her life, offering a listening ear and a steady presence. But it wasn't just his support that had drawn her in, it was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. There was a connection between them that went beyond friendship, and she couldn't deny it. But she had never allowed herself to acknowledge it. She had never allowed herself to feel that kind of love, because it was too dangerous. It was easier to bury those feelings and focus on the life she thought she should have. As Amelia stood there, lost in thought, she couldn't help but feel a sense of longing. She wanted to run to Jake, to throw herself into his arms and tell him everything she had been hiding from herself for so long. But she couldn't. She was married now, bound to Robert. She had made her choice, and she couldn't go back. Yet, a part of her wondered if she had made the wrong choice. A part of her wondered if she had settled for the safety of what was expected, instead of following her heart. But the thought of what that might mean terrified her. If she admitted that she wasn't happy, what did that say about her? What would people think? Would they think she was ungrateful? Weak? Suddenly, she felt a tug on her sleeve, pulling her from her thoughts. It was one of Robert's cousins, offering her a glass of champagne. Amelia took it absent-mindedly, her eyes drifting back to Jake. He was still standing by the wall, but his gaze was now fixed on her. There was something in his eyes, a quiet understanding, as though he knew exactly what she was feeling. She quickly looked away, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. She didn't want Jake to see her like this, confused, lost, unsure of herself. She didn't want anyone to know how much she was struggling. So, she smiled, took a sip of her drink, and forced herself to mingle with the guests. But the weight in her chest didn't lift. It only grew heavier, pressing down on her heart, making it hard to breathe. Amelia tried to laugh and join in the conversations around her, but all she could think about was the emptiness inside her. She had married Robert because it was what she was supposed to do. She had never asked herself if it was what she truly wanted. She had never asked herself if she was happy. And now, standing in the middle of her own wedding reception, surrounded by well-wishers, she realized she had no answers. The night stretched on, but Amelia felt like she was stuck in a moment she couldn't escape. She was living someone else's dream, not her own. She was surrounded by people, but she had never felt more alone. The night felt like it was never going to end. The music from inside the reception hall echoed through the quiet air, drifting out into the surrounding fields like a faint memory. Amelia stood at the edge of the porch, her back to the party, feeling more distant from everything than ever before. She took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, hoping to push away the heavy weight that pressed on her chest. The sky above was a deep shade of purple, dotted with stars. But there was something unsettling about the calm before the storm. The wind had picked up, and the distant sound of thunder rolled in from the horizon. It was as though the earth itself was reflecting the chaos inside her mind. She glanced back at the reception hall, where the laughter and chatter continued, but none of it could reach her. Amelia felt as if she were trapped in a world she didn't belong to. She had tried to smile and be the picture of a happy bride, but the moment she stepped into the spotlight, she had felt like a fake. How could she stand there, pretending to be the woman everyone thought she was, when inside she was falling apart? How could she pretend that she was in love with Robert, when deep down, she wasn't sure she even knew what love felt like anymore? With a sigh, Amelia turned away from the reception, walking slowly across the porch and toward the path that led out into the fields. The quiet of the night wrapped around her like a blanket, and for a moment, it felt like she was the only person alive in the world. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she just needed to get away from the crowd, away from the eyes that followed her every move. As she walked farther away, the distant sounds of the party faded, and the storm grew nearer. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the trees, and a chill ran down Amelia's spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to find comfort in the cold, but it wasn't the kind of cold she was used to. It wasn't the kind that made her feel alive. It was the kind that made her feel empty. Just as she was about to turn back, she heard a voice. "Amelia." She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She recognized the voice immediately. It was Jake. She hadn't seen him in years. Not like this. He had always been there, just a part of her past. But tonight, in this moment, he felt different. His voice held something more than familiarity. It held a kind of understanding that made her feel like he could see through the walls she had built around herself. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. There he was, standing a few feet away from her, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dim light from the reception hall. Jake's eyes met hers, dark and steady, as if he already knew the weight she was carrying. "Jake," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. She hadn't expected to run into him tonight, especially not out here, far away from the wedding party. But there he was, as if fate had decided they needed this moment alone. Jake took a few steps forward, his boots crunching against the gravel path beneath his feet. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't need to. There was something in the way Amelia stood there, her shoulders slumped and her eyes downcast, that told him everything he needed to know. "You all right?" he asked, his voice soft but steady, as though he had all the time in the world to listen if she decided to speak. Amelia opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, she felt the tears threaten to rise. The flood of emotions she had been holding back for so long suddenly too much to contain. She swallowed hard, trying to push them down. But it was no use. A single tear slid down her cheek, and that was all it took for the dam to break. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind that was beginning to pick up. "I don't know who I am anymore." Jake stepped closer, his presence grounding her in a way that nothing else could. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he just stood beside her, giving her the space to breathe, to collect herself. "You've been carrying a lot, haven't you?" he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of the truth in his words. She had always carried the burden of being the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. But somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of who she really was. Somewhere between trying to please everyone else and living up to expectations, she had forgotten how to be herself. I thought I was doing the right thing," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "But now, I'm not so sure." Jake's gaze softened, his expression full of empathy. He had known Amelia long enough to see beyond the facade she wore. He knew that she had always been the type to hide her true feelings, to bury her doubts and insecurities deep inside. But tonight, standing out here in the cold, he could see that she was unraveling, and he couldn't help but want to reach out and offer her a way to untangle the mess that she had been carrying for so long. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," Jake said gently, his voice low and soothing. "Life's not about having it all figured out. It's about taking the time to find your own path. Sometimes, that means stepping away from what everyone else expects of you and figuring out what you really need." Amelia looked at him, her heart aching with the rawness of his words. For the first time, that night, she felt a sense of relief. It wasn't a complete answer, but it was the first time anyone had ever told her it was okay to not have everything figured out. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be what everyone else wanted her to be. The wind howled around them, and the first raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. But neither of them moved. Amelia stood there, feeling the cool rain wash over her, but it didn't bother her. In that moment, with Jake standing beside her, she realized that maybe it wasn't so important to have everything under control. Maybe it was okay to let go, to let herself feel what she had been holding in for so long. "You're not alone, Amelia," Jake said, his voice steady and comforting. "I'm here." The simple words hung in the air between them, and for the first time that night, Amelia didn't feel like she was drowning in a sea of confusion. She felt seen. She felt heard. And for the first time, in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to pretend anymore. The rain continued to fall around them, but it no longer felt cold. It felt like a cleansing, a fresh start. Amelia wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had someone who understood her. Maybe that was the first step toward finding herself again. And in that moment, under the moonlight and the storm, Amelia realized that it was okay to not know what the next step would be. It was okay to be uncertain. Because, at least for tonight, she wasn't alone. The rain had turned the once dry ground into a slick, shining surface, reflecting the dim light of the reception hall, as if the earth itself were mirroring Amelia's inner turmoil. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and damp grass, and the sound of the storm growing louder filled the silence between them. Amelia stood close to Jake, feeling the weight of the night, the weight of her own thoughts. Her heart still raced, the intensity of the emotions she had finally allowed herself to feel bubbling beneath the surface. She wasn't sure what had changed in the moments they had shared. Maybe it was the quiet understanding in Jake's eyes, or the simple fact that someone, at last, had listened to her in a way no one else ever had, but something in her had shifted. For so long, she had carried a secret burden, one that she had barely even realized she was bearing. The pressure of being perfect for everyone else. The pressure of being the daughter, the wife, the woman everyone expected her to be. It had been suffocating. And now, standing here in the rain with Jake, it felt like some of that weight was starting to lift, even if just a little. But the storm inside her heart wasn't over. Do you ever feel like you're just not enough? Amelia whispered, the words coming out before she could stop them. She hadn't meant to say them out loud, but once they were out, she realized how true they were. She had spent so many years believing that no matter how hard she tried, it would never be enough. She wasn't enough for her parents, for Robert, and, somewhere deep down, not even for herself. Jake turned to face her, his expression soft but serious. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he let the silence between them grow, as if he were choosing his words carefully, understanding the weight of what she had just shared. The rain continued to fall in sheets, the wind howling around them. But in that moment, Amelia felt like the world had faded away. It was just her and Jake. And somehow, it was enough. Yeah, I know what you mean, Jake finally said, his voice low but steady. I felt that way too. Sometimes, you get so caught up in trying to meet everyone else's expectations that you forget who you are, and what you really need. Amelia turned to him, her brow furrowed in confusion. But how do you stop feeling like that? How do you stop feeling like you're never going to be enough, no matter what you do? Jake sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of his own experience. He looked away, his eyes scanning the stormy horizon, as if seeking the answer out there in the rain. Amelia noticed the way his jaw tightened, the slight furrow between his brows. She had always known Jake to be a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was with the kind of honesty that made her listen. It's not easy, Jake said after a moment, his voice filled with a quiet sincerity. I've spent a lot of my life thinking I wasn't enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough. Hell, I've made a lot of mistakes because of that feeling. But I've come to realize something important. He turned his gaze back to her. And this time, his eyes were full of something she couldn't quite name. What's that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That you don't have to be everything to everyone. You only have to be enough for yourself, Jake said. His words slow and deliberate, as though they were a lesson he had learned the hard way. You can't keep living for other people, Amelia. You can't keep pretending to be something you're not, just because that's what everyone expects. Eventually, that kind of life will drain you until there's nothing left. The rain had soaked through their clothes, but neither of them seemed to notice the cold anymore. The storm had become something almost comforting, as if the world itself was giving them the space to talk, to be real with each other, to lay bare the things they had hidden for so long. Amelia felt her heart beating faster now, her mind spinning with the truth of Jake's words. It was something she had known deep down, but had never allowed herself to truly believe. She didn't have to live up to everyone else's expectations. She didn't have to be perfect. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that it was okay to be imperfect. It was okay to be broken, to be scared, to be vulnerable. But even as the words settled in her mind, a voice inside her couldn't shake the feeling that she still wasn't worthy of what Jake was offering: his understanding, his kindness. How could she be? She had spent so many years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from getting too close to anyone. How could someone like Jake see through those walls? How could he care enough to try? "I don't know if I can be enough for myself," Amelia confessed, her voice cracking just slightly as the fear crept back in. "I don't even know where to start. I've spent so long pretending that I'm happy, pretending that I'm okay. I don't know how to just be me." Jake nodded, understanding more than she realized. He took a step closer, closing the space between them, but he didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to fill the empty space inside her. "Start by giving yourself permission to feel what you feel," Jake said quietly. "It's okay to not have it all figured out. It's okay to be scared. You don't have to have all the answers tonight, or ever. Just start by being honest with yourself." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. For so long, she had tried to keep her emotions locked away, afraid that if she allowed herself to feel them, they would overwhelm her. But Jake was right. She didn't have to have everything figured out. She didn't have to have all the answers. The sound of the storm raged around them. But in this moment, Amelia felt a strange sense of peace. A sense that things could still be okay. Maybe not perfect, but real. "I don't know if I can," Amelia whispered, her voice barely audible against the sound of the storm. "You don't have to know," Jake replied softly. For a long while, they stood there in the rain, silent, both of them letting the storm wash over them. Amelia felt something inside her begin to shift, like the clouds in her mind were starting to break apart. It wasn't going to be easy, she knew that. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be enough for herself. Maybe she could stop pretending and start living the life she had always dreamed of, the life she had buried under so many expectations. And as the rain continued to fall, Amelia found herself no longer feeling so alone. The storm inside her had not yet passed. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was facing it all on her own. Jake was there. And for the first time in a long time, Amelia realized that she didn't need to carry her burden alone. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, the storm's fury now passed. The air around them felt fresh and clean, as though the earth itself had been washed free of its burdens. Amelia stood there, drenched but strangely calm, the weight of her thoughts not as heavy as it had been before. The cold was no longer uncomfortable. It was refreshing, like a cool splash of water to a tired face. And for the first time that night, she didn't feel like she was drowning in her own emotions. She had stood there in the rain with Jake, letting the storm wash over them both. The world around them felt distant, almost unreal, as if they had stepped out of the regular rhythm of life. It was just them now, standing side by side, facing the quiet after the chaos. Amelia's heart still raced a little, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Jake had said something that had stayed with her. "You don't have to be everything to everyone. You only have to be enough for yourself." Those words echoed in her mind as she glanced at him. The quiet, steady cowboy who had been a constant in her life, yet someone she had never allowed herself to truly lean on. Maybe because she was scared. Scared of the truth. Scared of the vulnerability that would come with opening up to someone else. But now, she realized that maybe it was time to stop being afraid. The night was beginning to feel like it was hers to shape. She could let go of the image she had been holding on to. The image of the perfect bride, the perfect wife, the woman who had everything under control. It was all just a mask. She could take it off, step into the rain, and finally face what was underneath. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, but that was okay. It was okay to take a step forward without knowing exactly where it would lead. She turned toward Jake, who was still standing nearby, his expression calm but intense, as though he too was caught in this quiet moment of reflection. "Jake," Amelia said, her voice soft but clear. Jake looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. He didn't rush to give her answers, as he knew the journey was hers to take. Instead, he smiled a small, knowing smile that seemed to say, "It's okay. You don't have to know everything right now. You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said gently. "You don't have to have all the answers. Just take it one step at a time." Amelia nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She had spent so much of her life trying to control everything, trying to make everything fit into the neat boxes of what she thought it should be. But she couldn't do that anymore. Not if she wanted to be true to herself. As she looked around, the world felt quieter now, softer. The sky had cleared, and the full moon shone brightly, casting a pale glow over the wet grass. The soft glow of the moonlight made the night seem more intimate, more private. It felt like the world had been washed clean. And there, in the heart of that silence, she realized something. She didn't have to be perfect to be worthy. She didn't have to fit into anyone else's idea of what her life should look like. She could create her own path. It was as if the storm had cleared her mind, washing away the doubts and fears that had clouded her vision for so long. And for the first time in ages, Amelia felt like she could breathe. The quiet stillness between them stretched on for a while, neither of them speaking. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move, for whatever was going to happen next. Finally, Jake broke the silence, his voice calm and steady. "Do you want to dance?" Amelia blinked, surprised by the question. It wasn't what she had expected. But then again, nothing had gone according to her expectations tonight. She had come here expecting a perfect wedding day, a day where everything went according to plan. But instead, she had faced her fears, confronted her insecurities, and, for the first time, allowed herself to feel everything she had been holding inside. A dance. It seemed so simple, yet in this moment, it felt like the most profound thing. The idea of dancing with Jake, here in the quiet of the night, in the midst of a storm that had passed, seemed like the perfect way to honor everything that had happened, everything she had felt and learned in such a short time. I'd like that," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Jake stepped forward, holding out his hand to her. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic music playing in the background, just the soft sound of the world around them, the gentle rustling of the trees, the distant hum of the wind, the rhythmic patter of the remaining raindrops. The moment felt entirely their own. Amelia took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip. For a brief moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to do. She had never been the kind of person to show her vulnerability in public, never allowed herself to let her guard down in front of others. But with Jake, it felt different. They moved together in silence, their steps slow and steady, like the calm after the storm. There was no pressure, no need to perform or impress. It was just them, two people sharing a quiet, honest moment in the midst of a chaotic world. As they swayed together, Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to fully experience the feeling of the dance. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be anyone else. She could just be herself. No masks, no expectations, just the simple act of being present. Jake's presence beside her was comforting, like the steady rhythm of a song that had always been there, even if she hadn't noticed it. He didn't need to say anything more. His calm, steady nature spoke volumes. The dance wasn't about movement or steps. It was about connection. It was about being there, in that moment, with someone who understood her better than she had realized. The world around them was peaceful now, the storm having passed, leaving only the remnants of its beauty. The moonlight shone brighter now, casting long shadows across the wet earth, as if illuminating their path. Amelia's heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. She had no idea what would happen tomorrow, or the day after, but she was beginning to realize that it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had taken a step forward, and in that step, she had found something she hadn't even realized. She had been looking for a sense of peace, of acceptance. Not from anyone else, but from herself. As they continued to dance, the quiet seemed to stretch on forever, as though time itself had slowed down just for them. Amelia felt a smile tug at her lips, and for the first time, it felt real. It wasn't forced. It wasn't the smile of a woman pretending to have it all together. It was a smile of someone who was finally beginning to let go and embrace the truth of who she was. Jake, noticing the change in her, gave a soft chuckle. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. Amelia smiled up at him, her heart full. They danced on, the moonlight their only witness, as the night wrapped them in its quiet embrace, and the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in the stillness of the storm's aftermath. The storm had passed completely now, and the night air felt crisp and fresh, as though it had been scrubbed clean by the rain. The once heavy clouds had scattered, leaving only the bright moon and countless stars twinkling overhead, casting soft light over the wet earth. Amelia and Jake stood there. The only sound, the faint rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. The world felt quiet, peaceful, almost like it was holding its breath. Amelia took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs, feeling the weight she had been carrying all evening begin to lift. The dance with Jake had been a turning point. It wasn't just about the physical closeness or the quiet comfort of the moment, it was about what it represented. It was about allowing herself to finally be herself, to let go of the person she had been pretending to be for so long. She looked up at Jake, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight. He wasn't saying anything now, just standing beside her, as though he too was savoring the stillness of the moment. She hadn't realized how much she needed this peace, this quiet understanding, the freedom to be who she was, without worrying about who she was supposed to be. "I think I'm starting to understand," Amelia said softly, her voice breaking the silence between them. She hadn't planned on saying it aloud, but the words slipped out as naturally as a breath. "That, I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to be perfect." Jake turned toward her, his gaze steady and warm. His lips curved into a small, encouraging smile. The kind of smile that made her feel like she wasn't so alone. "You never had to be perfect, Amelia. You just needed to be you." She swallowed hard, the realization settling in like a stone in her chest. It wasn't about the perfect marriage, the perfect life, or the perfect version of herself that she had been trying to be. It wasn't about anyone else's expectations. It was about her own happiness, her own truth. She could breathe. Now. She could start over, not with the weight of perfection on her shoulders, but with the freedom to be real. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted, her voice soft but filled with resolve. "I've spent so much time trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be. I thought getting married, having a life that looked good on paper, would fix everything. But it didn't. It's not what I thought it would be." Jake's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "It's not easy, taking those first steps. You've spent a long time living for others. It's hard to change that. But you don't have to do it all at once. One step at a time. It's okay to take your time." Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of his words sinking in. She had been running, hiding from herself for so long. She had buried her feelings, her doubts, her fears beneath layers of obligations and expectations. But tonight, standing here with Jake, she realized that she didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to pretend to be someone she wasn't. She had the power to shape her own life, to choose her own path. The night was still young, But it felt as though the world had given her a second chance, a new beginning. She could walk away from the life she had been living slowly, one step at a time, and find something real, something true. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time, Amelia believed she could face them. "I've been so afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that if I let go of everything I've built, I won't know who I am anymore. I thought I needed to hold on to this life, this image. But now," she paused, the weight of her own thoughts surprising her. "Now, I don't know. I don't know what's next. But I'm not as afraid of it as I was before." Jake's smile widened, and for the first time, Amelia saw the depth of warmth in his eyes. "You don't have to know everything right now. You don't have to have the whole path laid out. All you have to do is take one step, then another, and the next thing you know, you'll be further along than you ever thought possible." His words felt like a balm to her soul, soothing the last of her doubts. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to rush into anything. She just needed to take the first step and let the rest come naturally. It was a terrifying thought, and yet, a freeing one. She wasn't alone in this. She didn't have to do it all on her own. "I'm scared, though," Amelia confessed, looking down at her feet, a trace of uncertainty creeping back into her voice. "I'm scared of what everyone will think, of what Robert will say, of what my family will say. I don't want to disappoint anyone. But I don't want to keep pretending either." Jake's hand gently cupped her chin, lifting her face to meet his gaze. "You're not disappointing anyone by choosing to be true to yourself, Amelia. The only person you're disappointing by staying in a life that doesn't make you happy is you. The people who truly care about you will understand. And the ones who don't, well..." Amelia felt the truth in his words settle in her heart. For so long, she had lived in fear of disappointing others, of not meeting their expectations. But now, she was beginning to see that the only person she needed to answer to was herself. She had spent too long living for others, and it was time to start living for herself. "I know I can't do this alone," she said quietly, looking up at Jake. "I don't know what the next steps are, but I want to take them, and I want to do it with someone who understands, someone who sees me." Jake smiled softly, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Amelia. Not anymore. You've got me. And you've got yourself, which is more than enough." Amelia's heart swelled at the warmth in his words. She had spent so many years feeling like she wasn't enough, like she needed someone else to complete her, to fill the empty spaces inside her. But now, she was beginning to see that she was already whole. She didn't need to be fixed or saved. She just needed to be herself. The night stretched on, the moonlight now bright in the sky. The rain completely gone, leaving only the soft sounds of the world at peace. Amelia felt a new sense of hope growing inside her. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from perfect circumstances or from things being the way she had once imagined them. It was a hope that came from within hope that she could face whatever came next, with all its uncertainties, and that she would be okay. "I think I'm ready," she said softly, more to herself than to Jake. "Ready to stop pretending. Ready to start living for myself." Jake's smile was gentle, but it held a depth of meaning. That's all any of us can do. Be ourselves, one step at a time. As Amelia stood there, her heart lighter than it had been in years, she realized that the storm had brought her something unexpected. Not just a moment of clarity, but a chance for something new. A new beginning. And as the night unfolded around them, she knew that it was just the beginning of her journey. A journey that would take her places she couldn't yet imagine, but that she was ready to embrace with open arms. For the first time, Amelia truly believed that she was enough. And that, in itself, was everything.